trapped in a fight to the finish, inside the video world he created. Here's your look at the Diamond Select. This is the Tron Infiltrator Flynn action figure. When a brilliant video game maker named Flynn hacks the mainframe of his ex-employer, he is beamed inside an astonishing digital world and becomes part of the very game he is designing. He must team up with a heroic program Tron and invade the forces of the Master Control program to find his way home and shut down the power-hungry MCP once and for all. This action figure of Infiltrator Flynn is based on his appearance in the movie Tron and features 16 points of articulation. Before getting beamed into the digital world, the first thing we're going to do, and act quickly at doing it, is to first figure out how tall Infiltrator Flynn stands. Taking my digital tape measure of mine, my trusty tape measure, and regurgitating it to you, members of the mob, get a gander at this. The figure of Flynn stands 11.3 inches in height. That's not bad at all. 28.8 is the second unit of measurement I'm telling you guys. This is one, of course, now in centimeters. The figure stands almost 29 centimeters in height. Checking off the figure's accessories, check first box, he does come included with an oval-shaped black display stand. And while there is no Tron, of course, written across the top, nor does it indicate Flynn, the fact that we do get at least a display stand is well appreciated. Very few times companies will actually include display stands, so the fact that he does actually include one, check off. We'll put that right over there. He does also come with a pair of interchangeable hands, which we will address in a second. Just again, a change up from the existing hands in his sockets. These are more gestured throwing hands suited for throwing the disc, but we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Overall, just nice, just simple gestured hands. Put that right over there. Flynn does come included with his identity disc. Now, this one is trimmed and spiraled out in orange. I actually keep thinking that this is translucent plastic. There is maybe a little bit of translucency to it, but overall it's just more so paint than anything else. You'll also see that there's a big noticeable peg on the back. Well, we'll go ahead and take the back of Flynn. As in the movie, you can take your identity disc. Don't lose it, whatever you do. And we're just going to slide it. One thing that's good about it is the sash that he wears is flexible enough that you can move it out of the way and very quite easily put the data disc, the identity disc, right underneath there, and then you just peg that in place, just like that. And just like in the film, he can somewhat hold the identity disc when he's not, of course, having it displayed in his hand. So I like the inclusion of that. He does also come, let me just get him to stand for a second. Hold on there, Flynn. He does also come with the ricocheting version of the identity disc. Now, you could simply just have this displayed next to him. I mean, again, you could just attach it to the side of him. There's also a hole on the top, which I thought, if anything, you could attach to the display stand, but it doesn't seem like it's the same size. So I'm not really sure what specifically that peg hole is for. His hands actually don't have pegs to them. Certainly none of the four hands come included with pegs. One thing you can also do for the figure, now keeping in mind that there's two other figures that we want to address in this line as well. There's Tron and Sark. Now each one of them, of course, come with their own corresponding and variations to their very own identity disc that you can most definitely use this with another figure. While he is, of course, trimmed out in orange, he may not necessarily be displayed with this, but if you do have Tron, for example, what you can also do too with the figures is if you get the hands up like that, we want to pretend, of course, this is Tron because this would be Tron's perhaps colored disc, and you can put that into his hand. So you can kind of simulate, if you will, him using the identity disc to sort of ricochet, bounce off the identity disc of somebody he is in game with. Just like that. Now, of course, to pull that off, you might want to make use of a different hand necessarily. But again, like if you wanted to, you could just, like I said, just put that in his hand like that. You can have him ricocheting off the disc. Again, it doesn't quite work with Flynn because, of course, he'd be using his own disc, but still, the fact that he would include that is pretty cool. It's translucent, a see-through yellow, as you can indicate by this humbled reviewer's hand, waving back and forth. violently, if you will, behind the back of the actual clear plastic. Again, I like the fact that they include this. I mean, heck, why not? You could just get a little bit of sticky tack, for example, mount that on the wall. Just put it next to Flynn, for example, like he's throwing the identity disc. So he does come included with that. Let's have a look at the figure itself. You got to imagine, I mean, I can't say you got to imagine because you probably don't know what I'm about to say, but I can certainly imagine as a kid I would have adored these Tron figures if they were originally released when I was younger. Tron is an all-time favorite film of mine, and it seems probably a little bit like, I don't know, beating a dead horse that I continue to say the same thing in every single review, but it's somewhat ironic, actually, that all the things I've been looking at as of late happen to fall into the category of my favorite films of all time. Tron definitely is one of my favorite films growing up, and still to this day, the original '84 classic is still a beloved film in my household. Even the fish and chip place down the street from my house, where I would go and get my fish and chips maybe once a week or so, at the very back corner, you want to guess what they actually had? Yes, it was. It was the Tron arcade game. So again, I have such great memories of renting and then eventually buying Tron. I must have seen the film a good 200 times plus. This is Infiltrator Flynn, not to be confused with regular Flynn. The calling card, of course, Infiltrator Flynn, is the fact that he does have the orange trimming that makes up his suit. This would, of course, be swapped out in the earlier end of the film with this being all blue, but I like the fact that they do give us Infiltrator Flynn, which, of course, has the notable sash that's wrapped, I should say, across the one shoulder of him. Before we kind of talk more about that, I want to show you also the close-up look at the face sculpt. Could they have picked a better likeness to Jeff Bridges, another favorite actor of mine as well? That looks exactly like Jeff Bridges, slightly off-toned in the purple skin, grayish purple skin that they have in the film when, of course, he's now into the digital realm. Like in the film, he has, of course, the helmet, the Tron, the digital world suit, which again is slightly different for Flynn because he does have the sash across the shoulder here. One problem with the sash being the way that it is, sure, yes, it's soft plastic. I mean, again, we looked at the identity disc, very easily slipped in place, tucked underneath there. But the problem also with this being soft plastic and all one piece is that you can only get the arms to about a 45-degree angle. This arm, no problem whatsoever. In fact, if you wanted to have his disc up, way up high, you can do that on the one arm. You can't pull that off on the other. I was trying to think, actually, if they had just split this, if they had cut this and left a noticeable gap, would it be a problem to see? A sight for sore eyes, perhaps? I don't know. But if they had put at least this piece as part of his shoulder and left this completely a gapped area, you could still be able to move the arm up. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. I mean, sure, it's good to have his arms up, but if looking at the figure you do see this big cut where it's supposed to be one continuous piece of fabric, yeah, it probably would look a little jarring, so I can understand why specifically they kept this as all one piece. The data disc, of course, poised and perched on the back of his torso. The coloring of the film sort of changes, it seems, where Sark especially seems to get more darker red in some scenes and orange in the other. I would have said that Infiltrator Flynn perhaps is too orange in the color paneling that they used, but really, again, in the film, it's all really a matter of what scene you're looking at. Sometimes it's a little bit more darker, closer to being red. In other scenes, it looks more orange, like what we're seeing right here. The one guard is on his one arm, while he doesn't have that on the other side, so he's not a symmetrical designed character by any stretch of the imagination. Thing you want to be careful of when you are removing Flynn's hand on this side, just pop this off just to demonstrate, is that this section right here, this extra little guard, is a separate piece. I'm not sure why it had to be a separate piece. I mean, they could have easily just sculpted this as part of his forearm. But it is there, and it's removable, and it's something you ought to be careful of, that it doesn't accidentally fall off and land somewhere on the floor. Never to be found ever, ever again. As we look further down the figure, we have the continuation of the yellow panel lines, very exquisitely and circuitry sculpted there, both on the front and the back. And then we get down to Flynn's boots. which I have to also say, good job on their part that they actually gave him full articulation in the ankles where you can move them up and down. I was expecting actually that the feet could only just pull off this feet. I'm here all night. But you could actually rotate this back and forth as well. And that is a feat. I did it again. Let's have a look at the figure's articulation. His head rotates all the way around. It hinges down fine enough, and it rotates back and, well, hinges back and forth fine enough. But you can't really rotate the head too high. This is, again, the culprit, I think, rests solely on the back of the helmet. Because of how far that sits down, you can't actually hinge the head any further than what you're currently doing right now. And again, I don't know how they could have worked around this. If they had maybe given him neck articulation, you could have poised the head a little higher up. But you certainly could not have trimmed this back, because that's the way it looks in the film. Unfortunately, it sacrifices being able to move the head any higher than what it currently is. Arms are going to be a little bit different, of course, that we've already discussed. Because of the shoulders, really both shoulders for that matter, this shoulder has that pad on the top, this shoulder has the sash. You're only going to move the arms at about a 45-degree angle, while this arm can at least carry its way, move all the way around like this. The other arm can't pull that off. Swivel at the bicep. Both arms, depending on whatever arms you decide to go with a double hinged elbow. And you can rotate whatever hand you decide to go with. Even the one that has the guard over top, you can still quite effortlessly rotate the hand all the way around and hinge it back and forth. Flynn also does have a ball joint on the underskirt, or under sash here. And again, the way that they've done this, they've done it in such a way that you can still rotate it. If they had completely glued this in place, well, then that would limit what you could actually pull off on Flynn's torso. He does have waist swivel as well. His legs split out to about there. Forward and back on the legs. He has a third on the thigh, a double hinge on the knee, nothing in the boot, and as we'd already discussed, hinge back and forth on the feet as well as they move up and down. And as we had already discussed also as well, Flynn has peg holes on the undersides of his feet. And while I don't necessarily feel like the figure has difficulty standing because he does have that ankle pivot, if you do want to make use of a display stand, thank goodness, Diamond Select does include a display stand with their release, the current release of Infiltrator Flynn, who is a nice, what I might also add, a nice looking figure. Now, if it was the weekend and you were in my household growing up, one certainty would be in place every Friday evening. After we had finished our dinner and schoolwork, we were in the car and bound for Jumbo Video, the local video hotspot that everybody seemed to go to in town. Not only could you get yourself a free bag of popcorn to savor and enjoy while you walked around and picked out your films, but of course then you would pick out the movies that you would be enjoying over Saturday and Sunday. My sister would be picking out, without fail, Adventures in Babysitting. Maybe that's why I remember the film so fondly. And for me, this guy, a younger version of me, would be picking out the classic film Tron. Pick out something different, why don't you, my parents would ask. But it usually always was either Superman 2 or Tron for me. I've watched Tron hundreds and hundreds of times. So again, for me, Tron is one of those classic growing up films that still holds a soft spot in my heart. Granted, yes, we didn't have figures this cool growing up with, of course, loving Tron. We had to wait for the likes of Diamond Select to produce fine figures like this, recreating a spot-on likeness, if you ask me, of Jeff Bridges from the classic film Tron. This is Infiltrator Flynn, so of course, instead of the blue, he's swapping that out in favor of something more tang and orange in color. This one also does have some identity discs, has a couple to spare. One is still currently on his torso, which doesn't quite really make sense because he's throwing the other one. Something I actually didn't get a chance to really discuss in depth enough in this review is that swooshing effect that you have for each of those discs. You can actually wedge those in between the fingers to simulate the discs being thrown. So not only can you hold the discs in their hands, but if you do want to have them more in a throwing pose, like Flynn is just ricocheting one of the discs thrown at him, you can pull that off by wedging that yellow plastic of the swoosh, we'll just call it that, in between his fingers, and he pulls it off just fine. I don't know how long he's going to actually be able to hold that, so we'll wrap up things in final looks quite quickly. He does have a display stand. I like the touches of that, and like I said, This is a spot-on likeness of Jeff Bridges. It's something in a way that, again, I wish figures like this. It always seems to boil down to the same thing. I wish figures like this could have existed when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I mean, for me, Tron was it. It was a film that I picked up on VHS. I think I might have even had it on beta before that. That's how old I am. But then I also picked it up on VHS, I picked it up on DVD, and I might even have a couple of copies of it on Blu-ray. Tron is still something I enjoy watching. Heck, I might even just watch it again tonight. But this is, again, the kind of stuff I wish we could have had growing up. Again, only as a now older adult version of me still loving the film, is where I can now find appreciation from pieces like this, produced from the fine folks over at Diamond Select. Did you manage to pick up this one for yourself? Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of Infiltrator Flynn. I'd still like to get a regular blue panel-lined Flynn, maybe with that cup attachment that they have on their arms when they're doing that ring game. I think that would be also a welcomed treat for my Tron collection. I'd also like to send out a big thank you to the folks over at Diamond Select who were nice enough to send this one, as well as the other Tron figures that we'll be having a look at in the upcoming reviews. Again, weigh in, members of the mob. What do you guys think of the Tron Infiltrator Flynn? I love reading your comments down below. And if you are a new member of the mob, hello, come on in, welcome, and enjoy some flakes of ham sandwiches. Does anybody eat those anymore? I know I did growing up. Flakes of ham and Miracle Whip sandwiches are greeting you at the door. Come on in. And if you are new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, turn on the bell notification, and keep these things right above your nose, those peepers, peeled to this channel. I know that sounds gross. You'll get used to that kind of stuff, because there's going to be a lot of videos coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.